Hello and welcome to our first panel of the day in this amazing day 3 of the Digital Week Online that is about how can we look at digital transformation 360, fourth industrial revolution, and how governments, cities, and business can cope with all these areas of digital transformation. My name is Dinis Guardan, and I will be the host of this panel and moderator. And I want to welcome 4 amazing minds, spirits, entrepreneurs, and as well researchers that are coming from all over the world. And I'm really very excited to host them all because it's 4 people that I personally deeply respect, but as well professional. I've been doing amazing things that I think their CVs speak for themselves. So I'll start by order, not particular by any kind of logic, but that's the order more or less that we put it. So I want to welcome Dimitris Psarakis, that is the European Parliament Financial Technology and Digital Transformation and Innovation Strategy and specialist. And he has a fundamental and strong digital, but as well academic background and research. And he's been leading a lot of the initiatives in the European Union around especially areas of digital finance and blockchain, but as well digital transformation 360, both from a regulatory perspective, both from groups of work, and publishing some of the cutting edge research that is really makes the European Union one of the most prepared digital policy making organizations in the world in these areas. And he's as well researching a lot of these things on his own with a strong academic background. I welcome afterwards Professor Kiran Fernandez, that is Associate Dean for Durham University. That is one of the leading universities in MBAs in the world. According to Financial Times, I think it's number 7. And it keeps going up and down, but it's been on the top 5 and top 10. And he is as well a professor, besides professor and associate dean, he's been in research with a huge amount of papers that has been specifically looking at complexity and technology and the areas how this is transforming our world, our businesses, our organizations. And that's, I think, especially in the last years, has been looking at policy making, how to look at policies that can improve cities, business, and organizations, and specifically how we can actually improve and look at data as a way of improving these things. And he's been working in a project that is called Index DNA, and he wrote recently a white paper about these areas that I'm sure he's going to be talking today, but as well as going to introduce himself. Then we have Mrs. Selena Lee, that is the founder of WSAFE, that is an organization from Vietnam that is specifically a bridge between investment and technology, and as well in startup ecosystem that is building an ecosystem in Vietnam, but as well in the rest of the world around innovation, impact innovation, and all the different areas. She's as well one of the responsible for the Tech Fest Vietnam Festival, that is one of the leading technology events in the country, and has been as well involved in a lot of groups of work like the World Smart Cities Forum project for creating Vietnam smart city ecosystem, special for Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. And then last but not least, Professor Yu Xiang, that is a dear friend, and as well the Associate Dean for Internationals from the University of Surrey, and a leading global researcher in the areas of supply chain and the areas, everything related with digital ecosystems from blockchain to the areas how this can actually work to improve business and corporations. Professor Yu Xiang is as well responsible for multiple associations and organizations. And I think probably the major one is the UK International Innovation Center, and as well part of the UK European Union Chinese Association, which is particularly interesting from a trade perspective of business and all the different areas on this. So I think it's going to be a great panel. As part of my introduction, I just want to highlight some of my notes here about digital transformation. I think one of the biggest challenges we have with our times is how to deal with these tools. Digital transformation are about everything about tools, but these tools have powerful impact that is probably the first time in history of humanity where we can actually use these tools to re-engineer ourselves. We can use these tools to re-engineer our cities, to create digital twins of our society, of our cities, our governments, ourselves. And for instance, yesterday there was a cutting edge solution in the sense that scientists for the first time managed to reverse engineering. So changing the human DNA in a way that you can actually reverse getting old, which is something that is part of our human DNA, at least in the last thousands of years. And for instance, I want to highlight one thing. For instance, a couple of months ago, the French government launched policies about biogenetic or biogenic soldiers. So this is not science fiction anymore. It's not about a Marvel film. This is happening as we speak. Artificial intelligence is changing healthcare. It's changing our world of politics. It's changing the way we deal with each other through social media, through our devices, through our sensors, through Internet of Things, through all these amazing potential tools that we have that can be used to create a much better humanity, a super intelligent society, or in the other hand, can be used to create a very dystopian society. So this panel is to look at how we can actually create a better society, how can actually create better business and better organizations, and especially how can we use these tools from a theory, from a policy making, and from a practical examples. And you're going to be listening to 4 different experts and as well leading global experts, but as well global entrepreneurs or global doers, because they're doing things that are changing the world, dealing with these things. And I think this is, for me, the most important thing. That's why I created the platform Open Business Council and Cities ABC. That's why I'm doing my YouTube channel, to create awareness for these teams, because the biggest challenge of our time is not doing anything. And as well, a very important challenge, I passed a small video in my preamble for the day, is that every business in the world is a tech business now. And there's no economy but the digital economy. But this is still very challenging, because from smart cities to blockchain technology to artificial intelligence to all these different areas of regulation, technology, most of our society is not prepared for this, because we are humans, we have our emotions, we have our challenges and opportunities, but we have a lot of complexity in our human nature, which makes us very special, but makes us as well very complex human beings and human creatures, or creatures at all, in the scope of nature. And of course, a very important point as my introduction is that the last year and a half, more or less, has been probably one of the most challenging years in the last probably 100 to 300 years. For instance, I'm based in London, United Kingdom, and in the last 2 years, we had Brexit, we had COVID-19, and for instance, this is affecting the economy for the worst in the last 300 years. And just 100 years ago, we had the finishing of the first global war that actually killed millions of people. But the impact of COVID-19 is now something that is, of course, very powerful, disrupting, and as well creating a lot of challenges how we cope with digital, because we are all here from different parts of the world. We have Brussels, we have Durham, we have Vietnam, and we have Surrey. And this is different parts, and of course, Professor Yu is from China. So this is possible thanks to digital transformation tools like Zoom, like events like this one of DigitalWeek.Online. So these reflections are key for creating better solutions, but very important thing for people listening to us worldwide to understand how we can actually make action out of this. And especially for the young people listening from us, and there's two deans or vice deans here in the panel. The young generation has a role that is the most powerful in history of all humanity, because in the last 30,000 years, we took like thousands of years to change ourselves, and human and nature were working together. Now we can actually destroy our nature. We can actually destroy ourselves, so bioengineering ourselves. And I think, let's say, in the 1920s, 1 year ago, the average time life of every one of us would be around 40 years old. which all of us are getting close to that. So that means we would be probably now last stage. Now we are in the beginning of our lives or mid of our lives. And probably our children are going to live to 150, 200 years, or our grandchildren. So I think, of course, this is not science fiction anymore. It's a responsibility that all of us have, especially people in big organizations and big institutions. But it's as well something that everyone listening to us has to act now from education, from their day-to-day operations. So this is my introduction. And now I would like to welcome my fellow speakers and people that I deeply respect with all my heart. And I'm very excited to have this discussion. So I'll go through the order that I did. And I would like for you to, just for the context, to do a bit of introduction about yourselves, and then the topics that we're working in particular around these areas of digital transformation 360 in your context of your work, your positions, and your organizations. So I welcome Dimitris first. As well, you are dealing with a very big organization, that's the European Union, that comprehends 27 countries. And it is probably one of the most advanced ecosystems in the world. And as well, of course, the continent that created fantastic things and some disruptive things. And as well, you come from Greece. There was the birth of democracy and the birth of civilization. So welcome, Dimitris. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Denise, for having me here in this wonderful global panel of esteemed academics and practitioners. I'm in Brussels, in a place that aspires to become the best place in the world in doing digital technology. Your narrative is very similar to the narrative we had in the European Union 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, the issue of digital transformation was an economic problem, because the previous productivity model we experienced in Europe or in the United States or in all over the world was in its limits regarding the costs and regarding its capacity to create profitability and growth. And this is something we realized in the years after the financial crisis, when we saw that fiscal policies, traditional fiscal policies and traditional monetary policies do not work anymore. And they do not work because the underlying productivity model does not work. So every tool we could use from the previous economic experience did not work. So European Union decided to create a framework in which, by which it would boost digital technologies to change not only the cost function of productivity, but also the profitability models of the European Union. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we had a comprehensive blockchain strategy, a digital strategy, an artificial intelligence strategy, an IoT strategy, and finally, a very socially charged file, which is called the Digital Future of Europe. Starting from the economic productivity point of view, our idea was to make Europe the best place in the world to do digital transformation and digitally transforming and disruptive things. But in the end of the day, we realized that this changes sharply our society. So at some point, we start entering aspects of social inclusion, of sustainability, of privacy, of strategies for addressing fake news. The Brexit story is more or less a fake news failure of the European Union. It's not that much a failure of the citizens of the UK. So this was our initial understanding of the story. And suddenly COVID happened. And COVID proved to us that every business or every organization without a digital layer cannot survive when the supply chain fails or when the demand fails. So we changed in 6 months all the financial infrastructure of Europe, and we entered a new concept into our policy called European Union Economic Resilience. And we define resilience as digital capacity and sustainability. So all the 1.6 trillion euros budget dedicated to this resilience is about digital transformation and sustainability. 16 hours ago, European Commission published its European Digital Decade Digital Transformation 2030 paper. You can find it online. It was published 16 hours ago. And this is a compass of digital transformation for Europe. It has 4 dimensions: skills, government, infrastructure, and business. And the idea is to set a map of how Europe is going to lead in this space in the next 10 years. What this study does not mention, and I would like to add in this conversation, is the need for a global view in these issues. Europe is a major player, but is not alone. China is a major player, United States is a major player. We need to work together and find global solutions on these aspects and identify certain technological standards and certain market structures that align the purpose. And finally, a social dimension that I would like to share with you is that historically, every industrial revolution, we are talking about the 4th industrial revolution, every industrial revolution so far was a field of fight between 2 major organizations in our society, the state and the market. And in every opportunity of digital transformation, of technological transformation, we had a battle between those 2 giants to claim their position in the market and in the economic lives and the social status of the world. The one who was always defeated in this battle was the 3rd pillar of society, the communities. And this created xenophobia, this created alienation, this created fear, and this created all these consequences we experience right now in terms of populism and reactionary attitudes, etc. This digital transformation we have ahead of us, first time, gives to the societies the possibility to create strong community pillars and communities to reclaim their position in the global, societal structure against the market dominance and against the state dominance. And this is the major challenge we have ahead of us, and it's a dimension that we need to search in a deeper manner in the future. Thank you.
I think very powerful words. Thank you so much, Dimitri Psarakis. And I think one of the thing that you touch, the communities, it's the critical element, because you cannot do this just in theory. We need to make it in practice. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of players right now. We're creating like a bit of a new Cold War around all these tools and around all this data and technologies. And this needs to be reverse engineered, because we have big corporations as well on the top of that have a huge power that probably was never so big in history. Because in history, even Napoleon Bonaparte was dependent of his health, was dependent of the weather. Now we have capacity of data, money, and technology that is unique, never seen in history of humanity. So I want to pass to Professor Kiran Fernandez. So in terms of your work and a bit of context of your work, both academic, technology, and policymaking, because you've been as well working at UNESCO with the leading university, and as well with leading universities and leading research, and as well with the governments, and you have a lot of experience with organizations on business as well.
Yes, thank you, Dennis, for that introduction. What I will do is I have a few slides to share, which might be more useful in the sort of work we have been trying to do. So, as you introduced me, I'm from Durham University, and for colleagues who perhaps do not know where Durham is in location in the UK, we are basically in the northeast of England, That's the big green circle, and the red circle is typically, which you are probably more familiar with, which is London. So we are about 2 hours, 2.5 hours from London if you take the fast train up north. The dark line you see there is the border between England and Scotland. So we're very much at the top end of England. Durham is a very historic city, and we've been a university that's been operating for a long time. We were founded originally in 1296, and since then the university is operated in a number of ways. If you're not familiar much with Durham, you will remember perhaps Durham from a movie called Harry Potter. So if you know Harry Potter, you probably have seen Durham in some form, at least the university in some form. That's the images from the movie. Anyway, so what I wanted to talk and perhaps take some of the points Dimitris made earlier forward is, we are using terms and concepts which predominantly are looking at society at the heart of any conversation. And some of the terms you have probably heard about are things like smart society, super smart society, information society, or even terms like society 5.0. In this particular concept, what you have at the heart of this debate of society 5.0, or this idea where citizen is at the heart of any technology or decision-making activity, is a concept called ecosystem. This is where you have technology, you have people, and you have other stakeholders all involved in one setup. This is an ecosystem setup, and I'll talk about that briefly in a few minutes. Nevertheless, the ecosystem has a number of key components, and we've been working in this particular space for some time, and I'll give you some idea. One of them, which enables such a society, such an ecosystem, are things, for example, like place, which is a very important aspect, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, why is place crucial? Place is crucial because when you start to use terms like adoption of emerging technologies, or which technology should be used in different places, and this particularly comes about when colleagues talk about smart cities, what you need to realize that there's no one universal technology that is applicable globally. Now, this is, for example, where we reside. This is the northeast of England. As I showed you in the earlier map, you can see Durham in this particular space, County Durham. So this is an economic zone in the UK called the northeast of England. And that happens to be a region which, as you can see, has a number of ports like Sunderland. You've got Hartlepool down there, you've got Redcar, Port of Blythe, Whitley Bay. So it's an area which is basically next to the seacoast with huge sea routes, but also a number of major trade corridors. Now, when you view at such a place, the way generally people have looked at places in terms of space. However, this is far more complicated than looking at a place or a city or a region as a place. Now, I can see why this is done. And this is primarily derived by politics and geography. So whenever you talk to people and say, I'm in the northeast of England, this is what you visualize. Or if somebody says, I'm in the European Union, the map of Europe comes to mind. If you say I'm in Vietnam, the map of Vietnam comes to mind. Now, there are advantages of why you can visualize these things, but the biggest disadvantage when it comes to digital transformation and society 5.0 is many things we are talking about as global challenges are not restricted by geographical space. Now, if I use the example of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, and I just pick up one of them, and let's assume we take one around education, where you are talking SDG 4, it's about education for all, accessible education for all. This type of diagram or this setup is almost nonsensical when it comes to SDGs. And unfortunately, the way we are designed to think is around space. So you have the UK producing its report to SDG. You have the European Union producing its SDG report. You have Vietnam producing it. You have India, and so on and so forth. And then you have basically what ends up becoming a ranking, and you put every country in one or the other quarters, and you say quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, these are doing well, these are not doing well, etc. Now, this is exactly the opposite of what should happen in SDG. In an SDG setup, first of all, these boundaries do not matter because there's such a huge global talent pool that is mobilized globally for all sorts of reasons. You have supply chains that are exceptionally complex. For example, where we are in our region, we have a very, very large cluster of very, very well-known automotive companies, manufacturing companies, the like of, for example, Nissan. We have Caterpillar, Komatsu, Hitachi. All of these are located in this. However, if you look at the supply chain, it's a global supply chain. Now, this is exactly the same setup in many such situations. So when you look at a place, you need to understand the ecosystem. The ecosystem is multi-layered. It's multi-layered. So you got place, you got technology, you got economics, you got connectivity, you got sustainability, you got education, you got creativity, and they all dovetail on one top of the other. So looking at one layer in isolation will not give you the sort of answers you're looking for in terms of an ecosystem. Now, this is just to give you an idea of a company in our region that is having a supply chain. This is not a very large company. It happens to be a company with about 250, 300 employees. Now, this is a map of the supply chain of this company. Now, you don't need to know the details of it, but just looking at this diagram, what you should be able to understand is just using place as a basis to understand how complex this company is completely nonsensical. And if you use that as a basis and then say, my strategy, technology strategy for place is the following, you are excluding 70, 80% of this company's supply chain. And this happens to be only tier 1 of this company's supply chain. If I looked at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, that would be like a huge global mushroom, and your policy would be only applicable to one dot in that particular huge mushroom, which is the opposite of what needs to be achieved for a number of reasons. So they're complex. You can see how clusters emerge, how clusters connect, how innovations takes place in small spots. And most importantly, what you see is if you don't have a good technology policy or a good understanding, you will exclude a lot of these small second, third, fourth tier suppliers completely out of your conversation. Just to give an idea. The second thing which I talked to you about was around technology. Now, one thing you need to understand is that technology is something that is very complex. Places are complex. And in many cases, it's very difficult to predict how these actors are going to behave in a complex system. So I always take the view of an opposite of what an economist takes the view. Economist view generally is very model driven, and the assumption always is you can always predict the outcomes of what an actor can do. And the answer is, if you look at any scenario, COVID being one classic example, it is next to impossible how actors in any system behave. Now, you can have some predictions, but there's no way anything close to it. And this creates a lot of problems. So we have been experimenting in technology and looking at a strategy called Smart Digital Web. How can you bring smart technology, which is digital, but you need to understand this is part of a web. This is not on its own, a web of very, very complex connections. The third thing is about business. Now, this is something which I strongly urge policymakers to have a look at. There is a huge debate when people use the word business models, and the business model spectrum is either on the right or either on the left. So the general assumption is you have traditional profit-making companies where the only sole purpose of companies is shareholder profit redistribution or accountability to shareholders, or on the other side you have this completely traditional non-profit organization where the entire focus is around social value creation. To be honest, this extreme doesn't exist. There are no companies that are on this extreme. In fact, most companies are somewhere in between. You have companies with strong corporate social responsibility, or you have a non-profit organization where they do understand that income generation is an important element of what they tend to do. In fact, what is needed is for them to come at the center, and we call this as sustainability equilibrium. This is very crucial. You need to bring a business model where there is a very clear social value creation. At the same time, economic value creation needs to take place. And this is a space that needs different types of business model. The current business models that exist are catered towards one of these 6 boxes. They are not catered to what we want to achieve as a global challenge. I then want to talk briefly about knowledge. Now, knowledge, as you know, in an ecosystem is very crucial. So I will focus on this whole debate which Denis introduced about ecosystem. So what is an ecosystem? So we have been thinking about this word ecosystem. And in our view, what is an ecosystem? It is basically a human-centric area. And I don't want to define this as a geographical space. Okay, you might want to, because as a policymaker, you have to have a boundary. But the way I'm looking at it, it's a human-centric space where physical and cyber-safe systems come together for a reason. And they're coming together for social, economic, political, and environmental reasons. That's why they're coming together. Now, this is contributing to a lot of debates for example, you have probably seen things like smart citizens, good governance, smart governance. You have seen smart city where the entire focus is around technology or around citizen or around governance. What we are trying to provide is this rich space. And what we argue is, in our definition, this ecosystem is a complex adaptive system. These are living entities where you have citizens that are connecting to interconnected system using ICT technology. And this technology in return is providing service to the citizen. And this is a circular system. And this circular system is citizen focused, and it interconnects with other key stakeholders like government, society, academic research, or business. And these are all very connected to this core, the inner core, which we call as an open interaction layer. These result in some outcomes that the citizen is looking for, which is a citizen outcome layer. And all of this gets encompassed in a concept which is around ethically enabled technology. So the technology forms the core. This is like the 4th layer of this onion, if you use the term. And finally, what you see are outcomes. And outcomes are what we are perhaps looking at as impact. Impact around economics, impact around politics, impact around society, impact around environmental. So this 5-layered model, which is at the heart, you have the citizen into an interaction, into an outcome, enabling with technology, and you see impact. This 5-layered model is what we are calling as index DNA framework. So when we view smart city, a smart region, this is what we mean, citizen and how they interact to create this impact. So we have been working on this white paper, which we shall be launching shortly soon. And just to give an example of, if I looked at one issue of sustainable urban mobility, and I won't go into great details of it, you will start to see how one issue is manifesting itself in this complex environment. I could have used the same example of education. It would look something slightly different. So when we are using the keyword outcome, it's not just one issue. It's a very complex issue. So I think I've taken enough time. So I shall stop there, Denis, and we will have further conversations as we go on.
No, fantastic. I think both what you propose is, I think, the way all governments should be looking at it, but as well all the cities and citizens, because I think this is the most important challenge of our times. And like you mentioned, we have to look local, global, and ecosystem driven. And I think your work around policies is critical, like the work of Dimitris, because if you don't get this together, we're going to have a very dystopian part. And then this narrative is key. So I want to go right now to Mrs. Selena, that is joining us from Vietnam, and welcome to our panel. So you have a bridge right now from the theory to the practice, and as well working both with impact innovation, which is key with all the areas of ESG, but as well working with startups, working with advanced technology, with investors, with governments, and as well in an emergent fast economy that is very young. Most of the population of Vietnam is around 20 somethings, and with 100 million people. So it makes us one of the new tigers of Asia, and as well one of the fast growing economies in the world that was less affected by COVID. So I would like to hear from you, Selena. I'm the only lady in the panel, so I would like to hear you and hear your experience and a bit of background, I think, for people that are listening to us.
Thank you, Dennis, for having me here today. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena. So I'm the one female entrepreneur in this group. And I'm happy to share Vietnam and one of the country get less affected from COVID. And we are happy for our leadership had doing good job, to keep us all safe and sound. And working in innovation ecosystem around less 10 years. And I work very direct to every project, every founder, and 200 investors around the world. And special government last 6 years until now. We're working with Ministry of Science and Technology. So I'm in charge of Head of International Village. That every year I get involved with my organization and my connect to leverage the ecosystem. Besides, we support not only startups to get investment to grow their business and find more solutions with the vision of impact for society and climate, but also we're supporting and building province and city beside Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, like Da Nang, and Bình Dương, two biggest city beside Hanoi, right, Saigon, to build a program of innovation ecosystem and the investment, attract investment to these city and province. So we have 70% to spend time and energy and investment for startup, and 30% we spend time for ecosystem builder like province. So they follow the government and they follow of the one leading, innovation ecosystem, because we are behind a lot of economies, but we trying working hard to catch up the world because we have a number of 100 million of young people, dynamic. They eager to learn new things. They want to transform the countries, but more sustainable. The young generation, they are very, quick learner. They want to adapt for the new culture, the new economic space. So, like smart city, as we mentioned in advance in before. And as myself working with my team on investment on startup, we focus more in deep tech and high tech because these industries in Vietnam very behind the world, and the number of projects and startups you can count on your two hands. So that's why we jump into leading industries to make it happen next 5 years from very beginning, from the topic, from the competition, from the innovation program we build from the top university in Vietnam, like technology and medtech and pharmacy university. So we launching this kind of program to have ecosystem to understand that, Vietnam will never behind next 5-10 years. So that we contribute our professional, also our experts, our investors around the world to make this happen as soon as possible. So thank you again. And I would like to share more, but I wanted to let the other time for the other speaker to talk and sharing own knowledge and experience. And their time, I would like to share more specific, the digital transformation in ecosystem and government in Vietnam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selena. So I think we still have a couple of more minutes. So could you please talk a bit about especially your work with your organization or multiple organizations and with the government of Vietnam. I think that's very important, or the smart cities. I think if you could just highlight that before you go to the Professor Yu Xiang.
Yeah, sure. Thank Dennis. So our working is, we are venture builder. So we helping all startup from idea MVP to up the accelerator to make own solution work in reality, to tackle problem, not only in Vietnam, but South Asia and anywhere in the world. And all the investment come from our organization from early stage, and the other our partner like VC and PEs to expand their business to accelerator program. The government of past is we get involved in size of government to try to change the perspective decision maker to make it come faster on and more infections, because we are so government, they are scared to change fast, because they just new and those people are not tech guy. So we understand that we have to come to communities as a contributor for the society and the government. We play very important role to provide the insight in industries and the needs of the market and the world trend, all these things together. So help them understand more. So when they make policy, the policies or any decision, they know own reality happen right now in and out Vietnam. So I joined like a business leader, at incubator leader, and entrepreneur and angel investor to show the number that happened last 10 years with us, that they get convinced so they can join like Dong Bình Dương province and Da Nang city, two of the biggest city and province in Vietnam. They get supported by us. They are strategic partners, so they get own program of innovation program to build an ecosystem and attract more investment to these big province. So we get involved deeply, not only consulting, but we are hand-on the projects, and the team and the experts get involved very deeply on every project with government and businesses. That is from insightful. I'm working like 10 years with them.
No, fantastic, Zelena. And I think this is amazing. I think a lot of this work, of course, is not known international, but I think it's important, like Professor Kiran Fernandez mentioned, the idea of the bridges and the ecosystem. And I think, Dimitris, you touched the part of the community. So that's exactly the idea, that we have 3 different parts of the world doing amazing things, but sometimes you don't know about it. So if you collaborate, you can do it. So last but not least, we have Professor Yu Xiang, that is joining us from Surrey in the UK. But Professor Yu Xiang has bridged a lot of very complex things, from being vice dean of one of the leading UK universities and worldwide universities in some areas, but as well working very close with the UK Innovation Centre, and as well with Chinese, which of course is the leading economy right now in the world, and a very strong economy that has been leading on the digital side and other things. So Professor Yu Xiang has been bridging as well, not only research, but UK and EU Chinese associations. And he has a huge background in research as an academic in supply chain, technology, and blockchain. So Professor Yu Xiang, I would like to welcome you. And last but not least as well, hearing your insights about these topics of digital transformation and how to take this to society in the context of your work and your organizations.
Thank you, Dennis. And also thanks for the panel to share your very valuable insight. From my organization, University of Surrey, so we are very good in AI and 5G. So our Center for Computer Vision and Speech, so basically for the past few years, ranked #1 in AI of all UK university. So Professor Joseph Kittner has the highest citation of across the country, across UK in AI. Basically, the university is very focused on digital technologies. And also talk about the 5G. Again, we have the largest 5G research center across Europe. It's ranked #1. Now we'll rename it as a 6G center. Okay, so so it's really shaping the industry by working with Cisco, Huawei, and the new technology standard develop. And of course, as you may know, SARI satellite, so technology is also world leading. And Elon Musk became a shareholder, that's 10 years ago, to get the technology to support his space program. I think from the university perspective, so we get tens of millions of funding from European Union and other places to support the digital transformation. We recently got £10 million for blockchain technology from European Union and the UK government. So I have a very, very leading blockchain development center, research center. And some of the things that I would like to say that are very, to me, it's very important that I learned from Dimitris about the new European Union policy and the report about the digital transformation, which is published only 16 hours ago. So I think that's something we need to follow and we need to pay attention to. And also, Dimitris also talked about the global collaboration. So I think, of course, Europe or China could not develop digital transformation alone. So that's what I'm also focused. I want to help Europe, China, UK. Of course, UK not is still a part of Europe, but another Europe EU, European Commission. So I have a role to play as to link the three regions. Actually, I'm the president of the Chinese Economic Association in EU and the UK. So it's the largest, most research and largest community of Chinese economics and business association outside China. So as a president, so we just organized several China, Europe, and UK seminar forums, policy discussions, debate. So that's one thing that I would like to mention about the Chinese Economic Association. To also think about what Kieran also talked about. So I think also very inspiring to talk about the social sustainability and economic sustainability have to reach an equilibrium. So basically, I think that's very important. We cannot only focus on economic development, and of course, technology can create a big economic impact, can earn money, but the rich people become more rich and poor people become more poor. It's because of technology. We should consider the social side and tackle the SDG. And this remind me to my recent paper in Nature Communications. As you know, that's one of the journals by Nature and one of the top 10 influential journals in the world. So my paper is it's already published. It's about the policy assessment about Bitcoin and the carbon consumption. Okay, so we find that I work with Cornell University and the Chinese Economic Association. As I said, that China, US, and the EU have to work together. For that, that's a typical example. Without the contribution from any of the countries, we cannot have this influential paper currently already published. So we find that the estimated Bitcoin carbon emission in China already exceeds the total greenhouse emission of the Czech Republic and Qatar years ago. So if we don't control that, if we don't have new policy for that, and this will consume much, much more energy in a few years' time. It's maybe more than many countries, the carbon emission. So we need to control that. Of course, I have another organization which I think may be interesting, is that it's called the Megacarta World Peace and Sustainability Foundation. For this one, so we work with Dr. Prem Sharma, so who is very influential, who was a chairman of the ruling party's branch in the UK, Conservative Party, and he got a very influential in world peace. And we think that if we can really bring world peace, we need to develop the economic collaboration, bring stronger connectivity, as just like what Dimitris said, and also international trade, international collaboration, and of course, I think if we focus on peace and sustainability together, we can achieve more. Just for your information, Magna Carta Foundation is not because we use this like this word, because we acquired the island where the Magna Carta was signed 800 years ago. So when King John was kidnapped to this island and forced him to sign the first charter of the world, the island called Magna Carta Island, and now we own this island, but we want to do something meaningful for world peace and sustainability. And for, as I mentioned, Dr. Prince Sharma, he's very influential. His son is the former Secretary of State for Peace, Business, Energy, and Industry Strategies. And now his son, Alex Sharma, is the president of COP26. As you know, that's the largest event of this year by United Nations about climate change. So I think there are many ways that we can develop what we discussed today for digital transformation, social transformation. And my role as a trustee of this Magna Carta World Peace and Sustainability Foundation, along with Dr. Prince Sharma, and is that we want to bring more discussion on this topic. And I do think that we can only achieve more if we work together. So new technologies will enable us to bring trust, and we want to break the black box of technology development, because black box development of technology innovation will not bring trust, but bring concerns. Well, so that's what I want to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yu Xiang. I think Professor Yu Xiang has been doing a fantastic bridge between a lot of different worlds, as you saw, for multiple positions. And of course, one of the things that I think is particularly interesting as well is the different cultures, the different ways of creating values. And I think the Magna Carta is a great thing that I will probably start the opening to the panel and the questions precisely about the concept of Magna Carta. So Magna Carta was the first kind of a global written constitution I would say in a kind of a governmental official way 800 years ago, that actually it was particularly historical and very powerful because it put all the different players of society together, from the rulers to the society to all the different areas and policymakers. So we are in a very challenging times when it comes to digital transformation and all these different technologies. So I want to pass the question probably for you, Dimitris, first, because of course you are in a major organization that represents 27, I think it's 27. I don't know, with Europe right now it's 20. Yeah, it was 28 now. I think it's 27, but you correct me. And I think, yeah, yeah, I think it's bigger number. Yes. So I think it's really important, and not just that. It's some of the leading economies in the world, because we have countries like Germany, Netherlands, that are all parts of this, the Nordics, the Mediterranean. So it's a very complex and cultural and economic. So I would like my first question, and using the metaphor, well, I think you probably can use as well the Greek democracy. There was, of course, 2000 years ago. But how do you see this from both your country and the historical perspective, but as well your hat as a leading expert in finance technologies, in blockchain, and as well in regulation part and research? And from what you've been writing and putting together with the different teams in the European Union, what do you think are the biggest challenges that we're facing right now? Because I think in theory, we are all agreeing, and I think in this panel, we have multiple different expertises, and I think every one of you is really global experts and global leading authorities. But the challenge is, how do you pass this from theory to the practice, and you make sure that you really can make impact? like Professor Yuxian mentioned, everything is about making change and making sure that there's less issues, less disparities, and as well that we change the problems, because in the end of the day, the problems are there and the problems are very challenging. I think we cannot just put it under the carpet and just ignore. We need to face it, but change it as well.
Well, I will give you an example. When we introduced the blockchain resolution in the European Parliament, it was during the hype of Bitcoin and ICOs. And it was funny to say that 750 members of the European Parliament voted in favor. It was the first time after 12 years that all the parties of the European Parliament, including the most strange ones, voted in favor of something. And it was about blockchain. But when we had to have, more specific regulations like MiCA now, the crypto assets, or the DLT pilot regime, we see that in the beginning, everybody agrees that something has to be done. But when we specify the policy, everybody has his own opinion and his own perception. And most importantly, everybody has his own ignorance that you need to fight. It's very difficult to align expectations about the new technologies. But what we can do for sure is to distinguish between those who have a clear view on how things go. I mean, European Union is a big organization. If you ask me how many people actually work on these exponential technologies, they are no more than 50. So 50 people introduce all these regulations. I suspect that something like that happens in the United States. I mean, in the governmental organizations. I don't believe that all the Congress knows about blockchain. So the idea is to increase first demand in the institutions for change. Then you move a step further and you try to increase demand in the society. Supply side works, okay, but it has its limits in order to have an impact. You need the demand side to be boosted on the other part. For example, in this compass of digital transformation in Europe that was published 16 hours ago, the clear message is that 80% of the population should have specific digital skills, and that 75% of the business, small, medium enterprises, etc., should have specific digital capabilities. So declaring it and implementing it are two completely different things. And in a global setting where my SME in Greece does business with Chinese, African, and American companies, we need to have some sort of common view on how the market should be structured and what are the minimum requirements of the algorithm. This creates a global ecosystem, no matter if we want it or not. So the key word here in this discussion, I think, is the word bridge. We need to create bridges and bring together regulators and ecosystems in two different layers to work together in solutions that we all trust and we all accept. And this is the invitation I sent from my side here to create bridges in these two layers. And this is also the idea of the Brussels Council, you know, Denise, to bring people together. So let's use this panel as a starting point and see how we can develop policy frameworks that everybody is confident with. Thank you.
I love that, and I think the bridge is the key of our world. So I know that we finished the time, but we still have an additional 10 minutes. I'm the moderator of the day, so we are flexible. So we have more time, and I think it's worth because the next panel is in half an hour, so we are okay. So I want to go to Professor Yu Xiang. So Professor Yu Xiang, you are, of course, quite an interesting personality because you are leading one of the UK universities, but you are Chinese and you are part of some of the biggest economic bridges between both Europe and the UK and China, which is, of course, the leading emergent economy, not emergent, the leading economy by right now in all the things. But China has been leading precisely on digital. and as well, China is creating a lot of bridges, but there's a lot of myths around. First of all, the myths sometimes kills the bridges, because if you create a bridge and people are not completely current about this. So can you tell us a bit about your work with these organizations? Because I think it's important to demystify, because of course, the Chinese economy, Chinese big corporations, the Chinese technology is right now leading the world in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of issues that I think internationally are not taken in the right way. So could you tell us a bit more positive angle? How do you see these bridges can be done, and especially demystifying things? Because of course you are part of the UK leading organizations, but as well bridging with China and the European Union.
Yeah, I think thank you for your question. I think it's a very valuable question. I can really answer this. I can really bring value, but I can share some of my own thought on this. Just give one example. You talk about our university, Surrey University. Interestingly, Surrey University is the first UK university that have a Chinese vice chancellor. Okay, top leader in the university. And Surrey University is creating more and more impact, and because of leverage this collaboration. Well, you also talk about China's technology, and there are at least 3 or 4 interviews to me recent 1 week by the top Chinese press called Xinhua Agency, and talk about my view of how China is open its market, have more international policies, and China is quite a responsible government in my view. It's because that it always evolve and change, and if there is any issue on the market, China can change. It's still a developing country. A lot of things still not mature. That definitely will cause some unforeseen issues. However, so now if you went to China, you can see the people who doing business in China, you can feel that it's more favor the international collaborations. So I just echo one of the statement from a professor in MIT, Thomas Malone. He said that some of the most important future innovations will not come from new technologies, but from new forms of collaboration. I really echo this statement because I do think that the technology is something to enable us to collaborate. Okay, so we should not, and also last Friday, I hosted a forum, China related forum called the East Midwest, and working with Professor Peter Williamson about whether we should go globalization or deglobalization. And the answer is very clear from Peter's recent book by Harvard Press, is that deglobalization cannot possibly happen, okay, because of the economic requirement. So no country want to suffer from deglobalization. Well, that's my views. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I love that, and I know that you're very practical on that, and I think your capacity of bridging people is quite amazing and very inspiring, I think, for everyone listening to us. I put on the chat, and our team put as well in the chat some links to all the different personalities here. So Selena, as someone that is representing and as well involved in the industry, and you mentioned impact innovation and impact investing. So with ESG, so environmental, sustainable governance, and all these areas, and Professor Kiran mentioned as well all of the things, there's a huge revolution going on investment that we're trying to bridge, but sometimes this revolution is going faster than actually the governments. So from your experience working both on the investment side, with startups, with business, with cities, with government, how do you see this challenge from your perspective as a business leader, but as well as someone that has been putting all of these things as well on the bridge with society and the communities around Vietnam, but as well around the world as well? We've been working with multiple organizations in the world.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a wonderful question. So a lot of challenge when you want to bring the solution to apply, or you want like policy, the new policy to apply on investment for new solution, or invest on, new technology, right? And sometimes they cannot see the benefit of long term. So we have to rule it like next 10 years, next 5 years, 20 years, and the market behavior researcher, So they have to understand that, you know, the behavior of user of research and even the investment of from like FDI or innovation investment, that they come to different way for sustainable, right? Or like SDG. So government have to accept, have to take time, shorten to follow that rule. Especially like Europe and America and Vietnam open the border for trading. So they have to adapt, they have to learn, they have to accept the adaptive in government decision. So soon or less, they have to follow the business insightful number and researcher, and reality happen right now. So for beginning, if you only join the industries of making impact, difficult, but time by time, the number proven, the result of what you are doing, the behavior, and special own young generation and student and media, and then it's, you know, together we make impact. So that is for my experience of 10 years and the upcoming on year. Special we got work quite successfully on the other city, big city and province that they happy to let us support them, you know, for the whole program, for the treasury and securitization and all the steps we are doing with them forward. So I think how you approve it, how you work with them, that is the way, and how you support them to make them believe it. Thank you.
Completely, and I think it's very, very powerful. I know that what you're trying to. Yeah, go ahead, Dimitris.
Sure. May I ask Selena a question? You are a pioneer in an ecosystem development in Vietnam, a remote market from Europe. What kind of help you would need in your everyday job from a major technological power like the United States or China or Europe to assist in your job?
So I started this incubator for my purpose to build better futures and for sustainable, you know, because we are one of 6 countries get damage from the climate. So that is very urgent, you know, and you think about your children's next 10 years, 5 years, and that is the main motivation, the real number and the picture you can see already now. So that make you and your community and the people around you, mostly powerful people, have to take actions. So that in my daily job is show the number from scientists that people have to believe in science. You know, special entrepreneur who take own advantage, own business, you know, own the nature result, they have to take action immediately. And the government have to make the policy to make this happen. Thank you.
Very good. So I think I will open to the panel, but before that, Professor Kiran, one of the things that you present is the challenge that we have around the Society 5.0 and how to bridge, and of course Society 0.0 is the most positive bridge and vision for society, which came actually from a study with actually right now a lady that is part of the OCDE, which is another global organization, a Japanese researcher. I don't remember the name, but I will try to quote it in the chat, and as well the Japanese government. But one of the things you mentioned is precisely the bridge between all the different areas, from policy making, from community, from technology, from different variations. And I think the policies are very important. I know that Dimitris, you and Professor Xiong are working particularly on that area, but how do you see, so to the point of Dimitris about the bridges, because you are as well bridging university, a community of where you are in Durham, but as well worldwide, because you've been from your background at MIT and all the different studies you had, from India, where as well you came from, and then right now in the UK leading a global university, which is really amazing because this is a global world. But I would like to see, because how we make these bridges on the complexity of the layers, because I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have to face. And then I open to the rest of the panel.
No, you're right. I think you ask a very interesting question, Dennis, and that is my view on policy making is the less regulation, the less top-down approach, the less bureaucracy, and the less bureaucrats involved, the better the ecosystem will be. Okay, and I'll just give one example. Now, if you look at, for example, an ecosystem, And I use the example of this ecosystem, which you probably have heard of. It's an area in India near Mumbai. It's called Dharavi. It's basically it's classified as a slum area. There are about 1 million people that live in about 240, 250 hectares. Now, if I use some statistics about this area, this is what you would have called as informal economy. But in this ecosystem, 43% of the people who live in this Dharavi, so 43% of little over 1 million people, are self-employed. There are little over 5,000 businesses, over 20,000 single room factories in this area. And the estimated informal economy of this area is around 1.6 billion US dollars. Okay. Now, if I take a government perspective on this, you would call this as a slum. You would call this as an area which isn't necessarily paying regulations the way as a policy that's been set up. And in every indicator, if you use a worldview, which we are used to, this would be seen as a failed area. However, if you look at the reality of this area, this is completely different. I mean, there is no single economy or an ecosystem in the world that has 43% of its residents that are self-employed running their own factories. This is and the supply chain in this area is operating through old mechanisms. So I would call it as a technology that is appropriate for this region, which is Six Sigma, which is 99.9% accurate. So now if I look at this and say, oh, I'm going to introduce a regulation that is going to force everybody in this region to use blockchain and RFID technology, as well as using AI platforms, etc., you will completely destroy this ecosystem. So what is the challenge? The challenge is to understand that there are different ecosystems that behave differently and need a different treatment and understanding. There is no universal regulation that can operate from a top-down basis. So to answer your question, the simplest way is to look at these regions, understand why they work the way they do, and then try to help with a policy if you really want to do some policy that helps that ecosystem. So I am completely against top-down policy and regulatory framework. It has never worked. There is no single example on earth that you can show that where it has worked. The basic thing, and all the examples, you can use any ecosystem. You can look at Silicon Valley. You can look at the entire area in Boston. You can look. These are all happening as a result of creativity. Universities spinning off something, people starting something, regions doing something exciting. That's how innovation mushrooms. It's the creativity in that ecosystem. So if anything you really want to do is encourage that creativity and keep out of the system. That is my simplest answer to that question.
Completely. Dimitris, go ahead. And I would suggest, because we have right now finishing our time, so I'll leave 2-3 minutes for each of you to wrap up, because we have a panel in around 12 minutes, but we are still having, so 2 minutes for everyone. Now, I think would be interesting and picking precise what you said, and thank you so much, all.
I need only 30 seconds to take it from what Kiran said. It's a temptation to say something here. I strongly believe that over-regulation is an impediment to innovation. And what is the view of the European Union on this issue? We never regulate technologies, never. We regulate the uses of the technology. What means that? It means that we have a starting point we call technological neutrality, meaning we set a risk framework. We identify what we don't want to happen, because, you know, all the technologists can say what technology can do. The job of the regulator is to say what the technology cannot do. And we have also the idea of social exclusion, that we need algorithms that do not exclude, or they are not biased, etc. Or we don't need to have monitoring devices from the government in ranking citizens. which is very, very important not to have. So the idea is technological neutrality, but technological neutrality by itself is not enough to allow an ecosystem to flourish. There is also the dimension of the business model neutrality, meaning that if I have a startup that is possible to disrupt the way of lending in a financial market, I will not favor the legacy business model of the bank by killing the startup. So technological neutrality and business model neutrality. And yes, let every ecosystem grow organically. Don't say to the ecosystem how to grow or in which form to grow, but the rules should be there. I think we all agree on this. Thank you.
Completely. So the rest of the speakers to wrap up. I think it's very powerful points.
No, I agree with this concept of neutrality, and I think technology neutrality is right, and so is business model. I think my view on this is let ecosystem decide what is appropriate for them, including what I would argue is what are the rules that are appropriate for them, because just to pick an example of what Dimitri said is rules vary. Now, if I use social structure as an example, which is very clear as a rule, how citizens behave in different parts of the world is entirely down to their cultural, religious, and political background. Now, this is something most politicians don't like to talk about, so therefore they end up talking about technology and other simpler answers in life. So my view is let us focus on trying to make ecosystem creative. We know we can make it, and support it and take it to the next level. Thank you.
Completely. Selena? You are all good? Sorry.
The one more I want to share here and now, we have the number of dynamic young generation, and we give them the guidance and the right to design what the future they want to be. So we are only the mentor, the advisor, but not decision maker. So let them 12 years old, 18 years old, grow their future of the city, the future of their life want to be, because we done our lives. We are 40, we are 30, we are 50. So let them decide what they want to be in like 10, 20, 30 years. That's why we have a lot of competition for young only 12 to 18. And they have done amazing project, real public book, and they make revenue when they only 12 years old, boy and girl. So you can see they know what they're doing. They know what they want in their life in the future. So just give them the right to make decisions. So that are my points. When we do anything for tech, for finance, for investment, for anything here. Thank you.
Thank you, very inspiring. Professor Yu, last but not least.
Yeah, I think, so from discussion of today, so we definitely understand that, the technology enabled more competition, but also in the meantime, enabled an even stronger need of collaboration. So we face the challenge, and we know there is a competition, but we still stick to globalization. And I hope to the countries in the East and the West can collaborate and create a more innovative and digital transformed society together. Thank you.
Very inspiring. So I want to thank you all. It's been fantastic. Of course, we could continue 1 hour more, but I want to highlight some notes. Bridge between people, between institutions, between laws, between especially the inspiration to touch the problems and touch them on a very practical and intelligent approach, but as well human approach. The importance of communities and touching communities. I think Dimitri's mentioned a big problem. We need more people to reflect this. It cannot be in the European Parliament 50 people that are the experts taking all the responsibility. Everyone needs to take responsibility of this, and especially I urge everyone, like Selena said, especially young people, that these are the tools of our time. So digital transformation is about tools. We have actually 3 or 4 academics here, because I've been teaching as well, although I don't teach anymore. But Professor Kiran and Professor Yuxiang are leading global universities, and Dimitris as well, coming up with the studies and research, and Selena as well, been working with a lot of universities. I think there's a huge requirement for us to take these, I would say it's bottom down up, because we all have to be part of this, but especially start with the young people, and as well creating bridges, and as well creating a message of hope. And I'll highlight as well Professor Yuxiang metaphor, the Magna Carta Island, that I think we need a Magna Carta for our times. I hope Dimitri and Kiran and Selena and you, that this is a way of as well creating strengths and relationships that can actually enhance, and events like this can actually create more bridges. So thank you all. We had around 1,000 people plus during the panel listening to us from all over the world. And of course, this panel will be public after this. So I want to thank you. It's been a fantastic time. I've been learning as well and improving. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.